anger,
sweaty palms,
rage,
closed fists,
wrath. What should I do? You breathe. Now, being angry is completely okay. It's definitely a normal reaction to certain situations and people. But how you react to that anger is what gets most people in trouble, which is pretty much why you were here. So let's jump in. This is a goodie. Hey, it's Debbie from Haven Inspired. Thank you so much for visiting our channel today. If this is your first time, we are all things self-care, self-help, and a few laughs in between. Today we are discussing anger. I have 4 key steps to help with anger management, especially when you're in the moment. So definitely stay tuned for all of my tips. So if you feel like you either want to mollywop somebody, bust them in their head to the white meat show, or just punch somebody in the face, this is probably the video for you. Okay, so there are some instances in life where being angry is warranted, where you legitimately have the right to be angry. When we ask the question of how we deal with anger, it's not necessarily the emotion itself. It's more so of the decisions we make when that emotion arises. So when it comes to anger, the anger isn't necessarily the core issue. It's more so a decision-making issue where you're getting angry and the decisions that you're making in the midst of that is the real true core issue. So what I want to do is dive into a few things that you can do in the moment and after things happen or situations or things arise to help you with anger management or managing your anger. I personally have dealt with an anger issue throughout my life, whether it be like lashing out or, just having really petty reactions to different things. I've recently gone through something where it's just like shattering and I'm just so frustrated, so angry. I could do so many things, but ultimately I have to make the right decisions in the midst of it. So these are just a few key ways to help with channeling your anger and really digging into the root of it instead of lashing out and making things a lot worse than what they really needed to be. So number 1, learn how to self-soothe. It's kind of like when you're a parent and you have a baby and you start the process of teaching your child to self-soothe at night. So that way you're not up all night, you're not holding the baby all the time. They can kind of calm themselves down instead of you having to be the one to calm them down. It holds true as an adult. We have to learn how to self-soothe ourselves. And you do that by simply taking a breath or two. Just kind of pausing, taking a breath. And I've physically done that in situations, in the midst of a situation like, woosah, that's a real thing, okay? Like you have to take the time to self-soothe. So take a breath and calm yourself down. Just like with the Martin episode, when Martin and Gina went to therapy and they had the angry corner, you have to kind of do that. Like, go to the angry corner. Like, you have to actually either remove yourself from the situation or internally you have to just like take a step back and really try to self-soothe yourself before things kind of lash out and get out of hand. Because at the end of the day, anger is not an easy emotion to process. It's actually fairly difficult to process anger in the moment. And typically there are secondary emotions that actually partner with that anger, which is why it builds up so quickly. So those secondary emotions look like embarrassment, shame, disbelief, rejection, annoyance, fear, loss, pain, deception, jealousy, abandonment, confusion. Those emotions are secondary. So now you're angry because you've been deceived, or now you're angry because you were embarrassed. Now you're angry because of fear. So now you have fear and now you're mad at yourself for being fearful, so now you're angry. So like, it's always going to be partnered with something else. So when it comes to that anger, that secondary emotion is also just important, and that's really what you have to deal with, not necessarily the anger, because that anger is going to be something that happens after the fact. All right, so number 2. So make sure to process the feeling you're having the right way. Now, processing looks different for everyone, especially when it comes to time frame. Some people have the knack of being able to process in a couple of minutes and can come back to a situation and handle it effectively. Others may take a little bit more time. So that's really going to be where you have to know yourself. And I know me personally, I have to process, like with a capital P and a capital S on the end, because I need my time. So if I'm mad, if I'm angry, give me a second or 2 or 3 or 5 or 10,000. Okay? Because when it comes to processing, it's a lot. It's all I can say. It's a lot. And more so when it comes to that, you want to make sure that you, one, really separate yourself from the emotion. And you can do that through mindfulness, through prayer, through however you want to do that, meditation, however you want to do that. But you really want to separate yourself from the actual emotion, so that way you create space between the emotion of anger and you. You do this so that way you can observe the emotion as a witness and not as the one experiencing it. So that way you can think logically instead of thinking with your emotions, and really examine and evaluate exactly what happened, why you're angry, and where the anger is actually coming from. And then that way you can have a mental checklist to say, hey, what do I see? What am I seeing here? Is this emotion of anger valid? Is there validity behind it? What is my anger trying to really communicate to me? Are there thinking traps present? Is it something that's just kind of spiraling in my mind and it's not necessarily fact? Is it true? And I talk about thinking traps in one of my other videos. I want to pin it here, so that way you can go back and kind of know which thinking traps are, but really ask those questions, really dig into that. That's the only way that you're going to be able to really process your emotion. And the only way that you're able to process your emotion is by challenging it, really kind of digging in and really evaluating, like, is this a valid concern? Is this really something that I should be angry about? Or is this something that is within me? Or is it something that I'm disguising for something else? Is my anger really anger about this particular situation or that thing that happened to me? Or is it a disguise for something else? Just like you know how people just kind of lash out for no reason. It's most likely because there's something else going on. It has nothing to do with that particular situation, but because of all of the other things that are going around you, you're lashing out in all of these different areas that just don't make sense. Now, the next question would be, if the anger is something that is valid, is it something that I can change? Is it something that I can control? Because if it's not, what's the point of lashing out, going crazy, throwing things, like just going off the chain, if it's not something that you can control? At the end of the day, the issue or the problem is still going to be there. So what's the point of doing all of that? You can be angry, you can feel that emotion, but me lashing out and me doing all this extra stuff, it's not going to solve anything. Also, when it comes to the emotion of anger, you really want to just make sure that you give that emotion time to pass. But whatever comes, when it comes to emotions and feelings and things of that matter, typically temporary. So when you feel the emotion of anger, it's okay to feel that, but you have to let it pass. And then that's when you're able to really think through all of this and really decide what your next step would be. But when you're in the midst of it, it's hard to really make logical decisions, especially if you haven't self-soothed or calmed yourself down. So make sure to let the anger pass, evaluate, and then make a decision from there. However long it takes for you to allow it to pass, however long it takes for you to process it, give it that time, and then come back to whatever that situation or issue is and resolve it later. Also, make sure to get it out. Like, my thing is like, I don't want to sit and stew in my anger, because that's where bitterness and resentment and things kind of can build up. Even though it's a matter of letting your anger pass, you also want to help your anger to pass. So, if you need to go work out or go take a walk, do a run, be creative and get it out in a creative way, or channel it into something that you love to do, a hobby or things of that matter, definitely do that. If that's a part of the way that you need to process and let that feeling pass, then do that. Okay, sorry. I'm extra sorry, guys. So now, after you've gone through processing, and definitely take the time to really evaluate how you want to process your anger. Everybody's different. So really take the time to really figure out exactly how processing or what that process looks like for you. So keep that in mind. But okay, so number 3 is to get some clarity, because after you've gone through the process and have processed your anger, most likely there still potentially is an issue or a problem that still remains. So make sure you get some clarity and talk through with that other person if it involves another person, or just think through, what that solution should be for that problem. So get some clarity by making sure, for one, if it involves another person, that you articulate how you feel to that person respectfully. So definitely make sure that you get your feelings out and explain exactly how you feel. If you got to write it down, if you got to write a letter, if you have to really kind of plan out what you're going to say and all that other stuff, perfectly fine, but do that, because you want to make sure that you get your point across to the other person, especially if there's any validity behind the anger that you have. If you found that there's validity behind it, you have a reason to be angry, there isn't anything petty going on, you're not lashing out from other situations and issues, this is a valid concern or a valid reason to be angry, definitely make that apparent to the other person. But do it respectfully. It doesn't have to be all crazy. You did this, and I'm tired of this, and it don't have to be all of that. Just make sure to articulate yourself in a way that it's respectful, but you get your point across. Also, in the conversation with this other person, make sure you listen to hear and not to respond. A lot of times when anger arises and things kind of get a little crazy, it's mainly because there's a misunderstanding. So definitely make sure that you listen to hear, not to just respond or rebuff what they have to say. And then also make sure that you prepare yourself to not get the response that you anticipate. If you feel like you deserve an apology and you don't get it, that could also make the anger grow up again. If they say something off the wall and then you want to run up on them again, these things can happen. So if you're going into a conversation with someone in regards to something that you were angry with them about, don't anticipate a specific response. Don't anticipate that you're going to actually get an apology. Don't think that you're going to actually get a valid explanation or an honest explanation as to what happened or why they did what they did. Don't go into the conversation with any expectations. The only expectation you should have is to go into it with the thought of, I may get a solution, I may not, but at least I'm able to articulate how I feel. Other than that, you shouldn't have any other expectations. Also, choose your battles wisely. Now, when I say that, I'm talking to myself only because I'm a person that's it's the principle. You know what I mean? It's not even about any other apologies or anything like that. It's about the principalities of the whole thing is my issue. And I need you to feel me. And if you don't feel me, then I have to keep going until you feel me. And it's not important. It's really not. I mean, it's the principle behind it, but it's really not important. So pick your battles, choose your battles wisely. Some things you just know for a fact, like they not gonna apologize. You just know for a fact they not gonna apologize. They not gonna be honest. They're going to talk around it. They're going to make it be my issue or my problem. So choose your battles wisely, especially if you're dealing with someone that is narcissistic. I've had a few of those in my life. So yeah, pick your battles, choose your battles, and if it doesn't make sense to have a solution or try to resolve or anything like that, if they're still angry and they're not willing to have the conversation with you, don't pressure it. Just let it go. I know it's easier said than done, but let it go. Okay? Just hear me in your head when you get angry. Just let it go. Okay? Last but not least, number 4, at the end of the day, choose acceptance. Not accepting reality is like going up against a wave or a current. When you fight the current instead of moving with the current, it makes it a little bit easier for you to drown. Okay? I know it's kind of crazy, but yeah, it makes it a little bit easier for you to drown when you're fighting against a current instead of moving along with it. So when it comes to these particular situations, or the people that are involved in these situations, if it's something that you either can't resolve or you need to remove the person out of your life or anything like that, you have to go through the process of acceptance and accepting the reality that this person is a joker. This person is a buster. These are my words. I'm sorry. These are things that I use. This person is not good for me. They're not good for my life. They're not bringing anything positive into my life, but they're bringing in negativity. So you have to take that time to accept that, even though it's hard to accept. But you have to accept what that person is showing you. And if there isn't a way to resolve it, there isn't a way for there to be a solution, if they're not apologizing, if there isn't a way for everything to be resolved, you have to accept that and remove that person from your life. Or whatever that situation is, just have to remove yourself from the situation. So there's a form of acceptance that has to happen at that point. If you accept the fact that the solution that you came up with that person is what it is and that's all that you can do, then that's what it is and that's all that you can do. Like there's nothing really else to really say about it. So acceptance is very important. Also acceptance has to do with yourself. Accepting the fact that you have triggers, accepting the fact that you have a processing time for your anger and for those triggers, and you have to accept that, or be aware of it first, but also accept that and make changes and adjustments where you need to help better yourself for future situations down the line. So take this as a time to really learn yourself, learn how you're actually channeling your anger, what's working, what's not working. Be aware of it, accept it, notice it, and then make the decisions and changes that you need to make to better yourself in those particular areas. And then also to just making sure to learn and find ways to help you with processing your anger when you're triggered. Now you can do that in several different ways. You can do your own research, find your own information as far as like different ways to help with channeling your anger and anger management. You can also work with a psychologist or a life coach to help assist you as far as figuring out the best ways to channel it for you specifically. Me myself, I've done both. I've done my own research. I've looked into different ways as far as like channeling my anger, as well as just self-soothing, because I feel like self-soothing is very important. If you know how to soothe yourself in the midst of anger, that kind of alleviates all of the rest of it, especially if you're one to lash out, or you're one to just kind of blow up, or you allow things to kind of build up. I know a lot of times people with their anger, it's mainly because they allow things to compile, and it piles up, piles up, piles up, piles up, piles up, and piles up, and then boom, they just kind of blow up. So just finding ways to stop that or prevent that from happening. So definitely work with a life coach, work with a psychologist if you need to. Practice mindfulness or meditation. That's something that's really helped me. There's plenty of times, especially like I said, I just had something happen this week. Like I swear in one day I did like 4 different meditations in one morning, because I was just so bottled up in my emotions that I couldn't even function to get through my workday. So really find what works for you. Of course, prayer is in there. Reading your Bible, working through your issues that way. There's so many different ways that you can do. Journaling is another thing that you can do. That's another way of kind of just getting it all out, so that way you can get it all out, process it. So yeah, get it all out on paper. Make sure that the journaling is something that you can really use to process what you're thinking, your thought patterns, the thinking traps that I was talking about earlier. So really use what works best for you, and only you will know that by practicing. So by trying different things, seeing what works, what doesn't work, and then also putting together that mental checklist that, okay, hey, I'm noticing I'm angry right now. What am I going to do? You know what I mean? So definitely make sure to do that. All right, y'all. So those are my 4 ways to help with managing anger. I hope that was helpful. I'm going to go ahead and leave you with a quote by Mark Twain. Anger is an acid that can do more harm to the vessel in which it is stored than to anything on which it is poured. Mark Twain. Okay guys, I'm out of here. So thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe, hit the notifications button for updates. Until next time, I will see you all soon. Goodbye.